As we get closer to the election, many polls are starting to be released. And looking at some of those polls, the results are quite inaccurate. So today, I'm going to be focusing on making my case in which I don't believe that the 2022 midterm polls should be really trusted. Now let's start off with 2020. Obviously, we know that in 2020 the polls were quite off. So to what extent? Now on the polls on 538, Biden was leading by about 8 percentage points on election day, but he only ended up winning the popular vote by less than 5. And from some state polls, the results get even worse. Starting with the first state I'm going to be taking a look at is the state of Ohio. 538 gave Joe Biden a 45% chance at winning Ohio, and Biden was down by less than a percentage point, according to 538. And looking at some of the polls here, even the conservative leading pollsters, which just samples Republicans, Rasmussen reports, Pulse Opinion Research, basically, Trafalgar Group only had Donald Trump up by 4 points in the state of Ohio. Fox News had Trump up by 3. Quinnipiac had Biden up by 4. And Emerson College, a A-rated pollster, A- rated pollster at 538, had Biden up in the state of Ohio. And just looking at the polling averages here, Trump was up by less than a point in the state, and really, the polls were not very good for the state, and Biden ended up losing the state by over 8 points against Donald Trump, but Trump was leading the polls by less than 1, meaning there was a more than 7% margin of error in the state of Ohio. A similar case in the neighboring state of Iowa, in which Trump had a 60% chance against Joe Biden's 40% chance in the state of Iowa. And looking at some of the polls here, New York Times had Biden up by 3, Change Research had it as even, Civics had Biden up by 1, Public Policy Polling had Biden up by 1, Caesar and Co. It is a A+ poster. It is sometimes quite accurate. It did have Trump up by 7, but generally speaking, the polls were not that accurate in 2020. So look at this. Why do some people still trust the polls? Now, their argument is that the polls can't be trusted, as in 2018, the midterm polling was quite accurate. That being said, at the time, there was an anti-Trump wave, which meant many voters were comfortable to express their support for the Republican Party. That being said, looking at this right now, it just isn't the case. Biden is in office. The situation is quite different, and Trump's name is kind of appearing on the ballot, as Trump is still in the news quite a bit, and therefore there is still likely going to be a conservative shift, going to be a conservative liberal bias in some of the polls. Now, some of the polls I really don't like some of the polls are really bad looking at the current 538 averages. Starting with the state of Ohio, which we just looked at in 2020. And the averages in a pretty red state right now, Tim Ryan actually has a 2% lead over J.D. Vance. Now, J.D. Vance may not be the best candidate, but it doesn't make sense to have Tim Ryan up by 12 points, 9 points, 9 points, 2 points, 3 points, Vance up by 2, and then Ryan up by 4. So Ryan has been consistently leading in the polls that have been released. This is the poll that had Tim Ryan up by 9, 12, and 9. Looking at some of these voters here, first of all, it really just oversampled Democrats. In the state of Ohio, there's about 8% more Republicans than Democrats, but in this poll, the amounts of Democrats and Republicans sampled was around even, which is not really that good of a representation of Ohio. And looking at some of this, I'm not going to explain Wave 1 and Wave 2, it's kind of complicated, but looking at some of these voters here, only 69% of Republicans backed J.D. Vance, 13% actually backed Tim Ryan, and there's a further 19% undecided. On the Democratic side here, as well. There's still Tim Ryan's getting 82% of the support. That being said, there's still 6% Democrats backing J.D. Vance. Now, these numbers, they do make some sense, but to say that 13% of Republicans are backing Tim Ryan and 19% is undecided, that is probably not very accurate. And looking at some of the unaffiliated voters, there's still 36% undecided, so really there's still a long way to go. And looking at some of the voters in Ohio that's typically undecided, they do end up voting for the Republican Party. In the state of Ohio, looking at the 2018 polls, the polls were also very inaccurate. They had Richard Cordray, the Democratic candidate in the state of Ohio, consistently leading, and again, Mike DeWine was able to win that governor race by 3. So yeah, now is 2020 the all indicator that the polls are indeed 100% inaccurate? They can never be trusted. Again, that's not necessarily my point or the case. That being said, looking at some of the ways the polls are conducted, some of the results, and just the prior history of polls back in 2020, about less than 2 years ago, I wouldn't necessarily put all my faith in these polls. So thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I make political content just like this video, analysis content and predictions. So thanks for watching. Have a nice day. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Bye.